What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Better Than We Thought podcast, season 2. And we're still talking about how our relationship with God, each other, and just life in general is so much better than we thought, all because of the gospel. Babe, we're starting a new season. How are you feeling?
It's been a crazy morning.
Tell me about your morning. I'm going to drink my Spindrift. We're sponsored now in season 2.
Yeah, right.
Not
You
yet.
can see how rushed we've been because we have no coffee. When was
That's
the last
true.
time we recorded a podcast with no coffee?
This is a
Did you get
dangerous-
coffee at home, by the way?
No, I ran out of time.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah,
Nice.
because we now are getting used to scheduling childcare so that we can record the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, but then we ended up doing it 2 hours earlier than we had planned,
Yeah.
which kind of threw me into a frenzy. But, we are here.
I'm sorry about that.
No, it wasn't your fault. You let me know like an hour in advance, but somehow it just didn't. When you have a baby, nothing exactly goes the way you plan.
So tell me about your morning, though.
I mean, the morning was good, and then it was just the last couple hours was kind of crazy because she's been in this stage recently where she just wants to be held not just all night, but now like most of the day too. So the things that entertained her before are no longer entertaining her. So she's ready for the next thing, which is like the bouncer or something, but I don't know if she is like physically ready for it. So yeah.
So when I'm not home, what are you guys doing?
It depends on the day. On an ideal day, she has a decent nap, and then I'll just hold her while she naps and do stuff. On a not so ideal day, she's just up and around constantly. And I put her on the mat, and then she cries because she can't roll over yet. So then I pick her up, and then she wants to talk to me, which is pretty cute.
She's learning how to
And
yell.
then she's hungry, so she starts to eat. But then she gets 5 minutes into eating, and she decides she's not hungry anymore. She'd actually rather talk to me. But then, of course, she gets hungry because she didn't finish her meal. So anyway, she's just a little thrown off the last couple of days. But she's good. At least she's been sleeping well. That's been a huge blessing.
Yeah.
I
she has
really
been
need
sleeping.
caffeine right now, but it's okay.
You want some Spindrift?
There's no caffeine in that.
There's some lime.
That's not going to do it.
Yo,
I did find a really good tip. This is totally off topic. For my coffee this morning, I saw this TikTok about a girl who made strawberry chocolate coffee. It looked really good, but I didn't want to make unhealthy coffee, so I blended my strawberry protein powder, just a little bit of it, with my milk, and then I poured that over the iced coffee you made me, and it was really good. And
Hey.
I got protein
Let's go.
in my coffee. Yeah.
A little kind of keto coffee.
Yeah, because it was sugar-free. So, yeah, literally keto coffee.
To be keto, I think you'd have to put coconut oil, which would actually be very good for the texture. Have you ever had coconut oil in your coffee?
Oh, that sounds disgusting.
It actually makes the texture really smooth.
I don't really like the taste of coconut oil.
Which oil do you like?
Tasteless oils.
That's not a lot of them. Oh my gosh. Well, I know that we're both needing caffeine, but let me ask you a caffeinated
I
question.
gotta wake up, man. This is not good. Okay.
Let me ask you a caffeinated question. So I want to understand more about, we made this announcement that we're changing things up in season 2.
We haven't had any time to talk about it, so you don't even know what we're talking about.
I went with it and I told the people, hey, we're going to change things up in season 2. But honestly, I didn't fully understand where you were coming from.
You still don't, do you?
I don't, which is why in season, episode 1, season 2,
We're gonna talk
I want to
about
help
it?
understand, what is your heart and what are you meaning by? Because I will say, I had to practice my freedom from offense.
I'm sorry. I watched back our trailer video.
It was so bad.
And it was terrible. It was bad. I was like, this saith the Lord. Like, that's like mocking you. That was so bad. And then I was like choking up my guts the whole time. Honestly, I was so thrown off by the fact I could not stop coughing. It was such a deep, like,
well, you had been sick for
cough.
like more than 10 days.
I still was really sick when we did that trailer. So I was so out of it. So, yeah, I apologize for anything I said in the trailer.
Well, it's been an interesting time because we, you know, this podcast has definitely been growing and changing as we have been growing and changing. Mm-hmm. And it's also even the production of it. You know, it has become harder and harder that we have had conversations where it's like, you know, do we keep going?
Yeah.
You know, is it worth it?
What are we actually accomplishing by doing this podcast kind of thing?
Yeah, because there's so many feelings because, you know, we're not oblivious to, I mean, we haven't been oblivious to the negative feedback or.
I didn't tell you this, but there was, I reposted our Q&A episode on Facebook this morning.
This morning?
No, not this morning. Yesterday. Sorry. But then when Ember woke up at 3:30 for her feed, I obviously like checked the time to see like what time it was when I was feeding her. And I see that I won't name who the person was, but somebody left a comment on me posting it on Facebook. So then I went and I looked at the comment, which I shouldn't have done at 3:30 in the morning. And it was just
3:30 in the morning.
Yes, for her feed, like in the middle of the night.
Oh, I thought you were talking about during the day.
No. I was just curious what the person said, and it was not true and not very nice, and that's okay. And in my head, I was just writing up a response. But I knew I was never actually, it wasn't a mean response. It was just like the comment was not true. And so it was an accusation about me that wasn't true. And I was like, I wanted to reply to it. But I was like, no, I could literally take a screenshot of the conversation and it would be clarified. But no, I'm not going to do that. That's not necessary. But then it kept me awake for like an hour and a half. And I was like, oh, stupid. I shouldn't have looked at that. I wasn't worried about it, but I just couldn't fall back into like a peaceful sleep. But,
well, I think that's one of the things that we did learn in season 1 is like, that, you know, even when you really believe in something and you speak it, like it comes at a cost to yourself. And I think that was one of the hard things is, you know, it's one thing, you know, me going through that. It has been hard seeing you on top of, you know, just going through life and the challenges that come up, seeing you just sometimes really struggle with those emotions of having just really harsh negativity consistently funneled your way.
Yeah, it doesn't so much like bother me as much anymore, but it's still like when something's said that isn't true, it's like that part of your humanity wants to be like, no, that's not true. But I did, even in my 4 a.m. half awake feeding the baby brain, I was remembering that verse where Jesus like didn't reply when he was in court and they were like throwing accusations against him and he didn't say anything. Because there's times to like reply and there's also times to just not say anything. It's not necessary.
Well, it's kind of like what we talked about where it's like I feel like I have said my piece for this season.
Yeah, I think that's part of what season 2 you know, our focus isn't so much to talk about the Adventism piece. Honestly, it was never the thing that we were excited to talk about in our podcast. We were excited to talk about the freedom of the gospel, about freedom from offense, about like how it's, you know, what it's meant for our marriage and stuff like that. That's what we were excited to talk about. But then it seemed like people had a lot of questions when we did do those Adventism videos, and we are passionate about helping people understand the gospel, and that kind of is intertwined with Adventism since most of our audience, at least at first, was Adventist. Probably we've weeded out some of that unintentionally by some of our episodes. But, and then there were certain episodes that we really did feel like God was calling on us to make. And who knows, maybe we'll look back and say, you know what, we could have said that differently. We probably could have said some stuff differently.
For sure.
But we were doing the best we could with the knowledge that we had at the time. But yeah, it was never the thing we were really excited to talk about. And I think we feel like we've said what God put on our heart to say. Not that it won't come up in other episodes. I know I'm actually interviewing a friend of mine in a couple days for probably next week's episode. And I'm sure there's some Adventism stuff that's going to come out as she shares her story. But that's not necessarily like the theme of what we're trying to talk about.
Yeah. And I remember before we even like recorded our first episode, that's why you don't drink sparkling water on a podcast. Anyway.
That's why I said no. Actually, it's not. It's because I think that Spindrift is really nasty.
That's a cold take, and you just ruined our sponsorship.
That is an episode we should do sometime.
What?
That would be hilarious. Hot takes.
Hot take episode.
Now, not our unfiltered couple hot takes that we do.
You never know.
Any other couples do that? Just say hot takes to each other that you could never say to anybody else. It's really fun.
It is pretty fun. But I remember before we even released the first episode, kind of thinking through, like, you know, do we want to talk about our story so quickly? And
yeah,
I think
we were hesitant for a while.
And you know, where I was at, and we talked about it, was like, you know, I want to use this podcast almost as a tool to also process myself. And because I think where I had come to, I'll speak for myself, was like, okay, I'm learning all of these things, and I've been now really feeling convicted about what the truth is and how it's different than what I thought it was before. But honestly, season 1 was almost a progression of like sharing what I'm learning. And then I feel like we had so many moments of like, oh my goodness, there are all these things that we believed that were just not biblical, that were just not healthy. And we had so many of those conversations. Like so many of the episodes were born out of just the conversations that we were having.
Yeah, and also some of the conversations we were having with people listening to the episodes that had similar experiences and were processing some of those experiences with us. And, you know, or maybe their experiences were very different and they had different reactions. And just like hearing the way that some of those toxic things has affected other people's Christianity, I think was very sobering. Yeah.
We found a lot of people with common experience.
Yeah.
And so that was, for me, that's where some of those stories helped me keep going through season 1. And that's where now going into season 2, I want to hear you more and understand, you know, your heart and vision behind it more. But what I'll say for me is, now that we've gone through this process of, it's a very vulnerable thing to tell publicly, to share how you actually feel.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there's my whole life, there's so many filters and things, and, you know, and that's part of life, having filters, etc. Not everybody can handle what you really think. But especially in this area of spirituality, the area that is deepest to both of us, I think it felt so freeing to, if on one end it felt freeing, on the other end it felt very vulnerable to share, this is what I actually think.
I think it felt more heavy for me than freeing. I didn't really enjoy sharing it. I feel like, because I knew what the backlash was going to be, especially because I did grow up in much more conservative circles. I didn't expect the backlash to be as much as it was, but I understand why, because I know how I used to think when I was in that mindset, and I used to think that someone who thinks the way that we now think was going to be lost, and, you know, out of brotherly concern for them, you have to warn them. And so I understand that that's probably how a lot of people who are saying things in the comments feel, and so I think we can have understanding for that. But yeah, for me, it wasn't necessarily so fun to talk about. Not that I think it was fun for you either.
It definitely was not.
No, it wasn't fun. But yeah.
But I think that's where, like, my heart for season 2 is, now that we have shared that, I think the people that are still listening, and that are still watching, still, you know, commenting in positive ways, or even messaging us, are people that they rock with it. They're rocking with the gospel. They're saying, you know what, Jesus really is enough. And I think that's maybe one of the gifts of going through the hard things, is that I think the people that are left, the people that are still listening in season 2, are people that actually believe and resonate with what we're talking about.
Or maybe they just want to learn. Maybe they don't necessarily agree, but they want to hear out our perspective.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that either they believe it or are curious.
Yeah.
And that's really who we've always wanted to talk to.
Exactly. We were never trying to talk to the people who who felt super strong in their current beliefs and had no interest in looking into anything else. We were never talking to those people, which is where most of those comments came from. And I understand why they came, because those episodes were never meant for them anyway.
And that's where I'm even talking and talking it through, I'm actually really excited for season 2 for that reason. Is I think we can finally, I think there'll always be, as new people discover some of the content, I think there'll always be some measure of backlash. But I like that we can now move forward as a, maybe for the first time, a Better Than We Thought community. And I'm excited to see where that happens. I'm excited to see the friendships that might be formed. I'm excited to see just some of the conversations that can be had.
Interviews that we're going to have.
Yeah, and with more freedom, without the fear of, this is going to be some groundbreaking thing. No, I mean, at this point, if people don't know what we're about, they just haven't heard our episodes. Yeah. And so now being able to, hey, if you want to, we're not, one value I love from Fresh Life Church is we're not for everyone.
That's true.
And
I think we've said that in all
that.
of our episodes, well, not all, but our controversial episodes, because, there's it's kind of, I don't know if it's exactly on topic, but a friend was sharing something with me about how she was having a hard time looking at videos or reels of couples because she was single. And I was like, no, I totally get that, because this was when I was pregnant with Ember, and I was like, I can't watch reels about stillbirths or miscarriages, even though I'm so thankful people are sharing their stories, because people who have been through that need that encouragement. But for me, who's pregnant with a healthy baby but has a lot of those anxieties, as pretty much any pregnant mom does, I don't need to be watching the stillbirth reels. They're not helpful for me.
It's not for you in this season.
Or in this season, in this season, that doesn't bother me as much. But the SIDS reels, and I don't need to see that, or whatever it is. And I think that there's different types of content out there for different people, and that's okay. If it's not something that you're interested in, you can just kindly move on.
Sure. And I think at this point, a lot of people have. And that is a beautiful thing where I'm excited and thankful for the new conversations that we get to have. Yeah. But with that, the thought
behind some of this.
Yeah.
So we did talk about this, but it was 3 weeks ago, and I feel like so much has happened since then. But,
yeah, for sure.
Or not even happened, but just, mental headspace. Shout out to Tim and Becky. That's kind of actually where the original thought behind some of this was. I was talking to them about it when they were visiting. You were doing a work thing or something in one of my lucid moments, since I was so sick. But in one of my half present moments when they were here, we were just talking about the last season of the podcast. And I was just asking their thoughts, because there's not a lot of people who have listened to everything.
Sure.
So the people who have, I'm like, tell me, what do you think? Yeah. And they just had some really good input, that a lot of times when people are listening to a podcast, they're not necessarily looking for someone to try to educate them. Now, I think that there are people who are looking at specifically educational podcasts, because I know I do that a lot too. But oftentimes those podcasts are by people who are an expert in that field, they're a doctor of this, or if I'm looking up something on infant sleep, I'm going to look up something from somebody who actually has expertise in that area, not just a random person who's this is what my baby did kind of thing. So there's definitely educational podcasts out there, but I think the vibe that a lot of people were more expecting from our podcast was maybe just more conversational, because we're not necessarily experts in, I mean, you are more so with having your master's in
divinity.
Thank you. I'm so tired. This is not good. But just a more conversational approach, and that maybe some of our even more controversial episodes, people perceived it as if we were like trying to tell them what to do, or trying to say like we know better than you, or we know something you don't know, or that kind of thing. And that maybe having a more conversational approach to it would be less like, I don't know, intimidating or whatever to people, but it would seem less confrontational. And I was like, that's actually a really good point, that maybe we can be sharing some of this, our heart behind things, but maybe we haven't shared like our heart behind it as much as like the logic, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So in this season, more trying to just have a conversation, instead of, oftentimes we would plan ahead like, okay, we're going to talk about this and talk about this and talk about this, and then it can almost sound like more like a presentation than podcasts in general are normally more just a conversation and see where it goes kind of thing, less like scripted kind of thing. So I don't know if that really makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like no.
Yeah, no, I mean, what you're saying is making what we share more conversational and less presentation based.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Now, this episode is all over the place because we literally did not talk about it at all until we sat down. So,
which I think still fits.
Yeah, true. But I just mean like not every episode is going to be quite that. Like we are still going to have like a theme probably that we're going to talk about.
And I think that's what we're going to continue to talk through.
Yeah.
And kind of, yeah.
Because we've both done the more presentational style. I did too. So I'm not like saying that it was you that did that.
No, for sure.
Like I would have my whole notes. And I think on some topics you have to do that, to be honest. Like some of our topics in the last season, we had to do in a more presentational kind of way because they were like deep theological things. And so, but I think what could happen is that then we would carry that over to just our more chill episodes, and then they would be more presentational. If that makes sense.
I mean, the way I feel about that is, again, it requires a certain vulnerability. It requires a like, someone whose content I really appreciate is Tim Ross.
You've told me about that. I need to listen to some of his stuff.
Yeah, and I think his podcast is like The Basement or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And it's
ours could be The Basement.
Yeah, we're in a
basement
right now. But no, I appreciate that, like that permission to just be where you are and just speak, and that is something that is different for me as a pastor.
Yeah.
Because when you're a pastor, there's just certain things you can't say.
Right. For sure.
And there's also, being free from offense doesn't mean that you don't sometimes have strong feelings.
Oh, totally.
Something. And so choosing not to go there, choosing to, and which in general is always a good idea of like having benevolence towards everyone. When you start getting into a more conversational approach, it just like you do have to lower that shield.
Yeah.
And sometimes you are going to say things that you might, you might amend later on. And so
right,
I think that's the part where...
Yeah, that's more nerve-wracking.
That's the part that is scary and that, I know that I'm going to have to grow in.
That makes sense. No, I totally get that. I think the difference is that, like, there is a certain, like, buttoned-upness that's expected from a pastor in the pulpit that's not expected on a podcast.
Sure.
Like, even, like, take, like, Levi and Jenny's podcast that we love. Like, their podcast is a lot more chilled than how they would be in the pulpit on Sunday.
Yeah.
Because, it's two different, like, formats.
It's a very different format.
So I feel like we're just learning the podcast format. Because we've both done a lot of public speaking, like, from the pulpit. but the podcast is very different. And I think we probably carried over our public speaking whatever to some extent into how we do the podcast. And so this season is just like trying to relax a little bit, probably.
Yeah, it's discovering, it's trying new things, and again, I know it's going to be hard for me, but I'm willing to try.
You're doing a great job.
Thanks.
We don't know where this episode's going, do we?
Well, I mean, I've already come up with the theme.
Oh, okay. Tell me.
This podcast has had a theme.
Yeah?
Yeah, this episode definitely. It's what we learned from season 1.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
What was your favorite episode of season 1, and what was your least favorite? Is that a terrible question?
My favorite episode from season 1 was actually... you're gonna have to practice being free from offense.
It's the one with Tim.
It was my first episode with Chris.
Oh, okay.
I
knew it was gonna be one that was not with me. That's why you said free from offense.
This is why I said that.
I'm not offended at all.
Thank you.
I actually appreciate you doing so many episodes without me, because that was never the plan. But before we had childcare and then me being sick and having a baby, and yeah,
I feel like in general I'm excited for us to get back in a flow.
Me too.
Because we just haven't had the consistency, and not only that, but it's been a constant, like, I mean...
What are we going to do for the podcast this week? Because, like...
Yes, but more like, you know, you were pregnant and then you were sick, and then it's like...
Well, and then I was fine for a while, but we didn't have anybody to take care of Ember, and we got to a point where she could no longer be on the podcast, because we tried to record an episode. That was my least favorite episode. You guys never saw it because we were trying to record it, and bless her heart, Ember was losing it. And I kept trying to, like, shush her because we didn't have any childcare. And halfway through, we were just like, this is not working anymore. So we just packed up and went home.
So that was your least favorite. What was your favorite?
What was my favorite? Location-wise, that one in Glacier.
That was cool.
Though that was very hard to record because people kept coming and interrupting us.
It was really hard to edit. And that's before we had Paul. That was really rough.
Yeah. But content-wise, I really enjoyed, like, talking about freedom from offense. Maybe our one about our first year of marriage. That was fun. Okay.
Yeah, kind of recapping that a little bit.
Yeah, that was fun. That feels like so long ago.
It does. Everything feels like before Ember or after Ember. And even after Ember
now is blurring because it's been almost 6 months.
And every month is a little bit different.
So different.
So
yeah.
There's just been it feels like so much, that whole thing of like how you grow as a parent.
Your parent
Your brain is growing.
It's really true.
And changing in a similar way of puberty and adolescence.
Puberty and purity are very synonymous in some cultures.
Goodness gracious. Yeah, that's been a real thing where it's like, man, how many versions of myself have been on this podcast?
Oh, don't worry. You're going to have a whole lot more, because just wait till she's a toddler. We're going to be in for it. Not in the negative way that people say, like, oh, just wait. Like, it's actually going to be really fun. And we're going to learn a lot. And we're going to change a lot.
Yeah. No, that's true. I appreciate you clarifying that.
Yeah, no, not in the negative way.
That is a pet peeve of mine when people are like...
Oh, me too.
People that are older than you be like... Just wait till then. I'm like... That's not helpful. That is a trigger, emotional trigger for me.
Well, it's actually a really insensitive thing to say to someone, too.
But it's also like... Yeah, and you're not me. So
exactly, and you don't have the same kid. I remember someone told me, they were like, "Don't worry." Like it was the last couple of weeks of being pregnant. They're like, "Don't worry, you will get so much more sleep when your baby gets here than you get right now." And now, to be fair, I do know a lot of people who have terrible insomnia the last couple of weeks of pregnancy, and then their baby sleeps really well.
So for me, makes sense for them.
I slept really well when I was pregnant, and we had a baby who didn't sleep.
But also, if you raised your kids in the 90s and you're trying to tell me about how it's going to be for me, it's like...
It's not the same.
Bro, no.
Well, and parenting techniques are different. So, like, the way we're raising Ember is, like, completely different.
And it's not that we're not going to make mistakes. It's not that we haven't made mistakes. It's just that at the end of the day, our sources of wisdom is not folklore. It's actually trying. It's not just stories that have been passed down.
Oh, yes.
We're not basing it off.
I'm really passionate about
this
that.
person did this and this person in the family did that. No, we're like, anyway, we had a whole episode about that.
Parenting.
I mean, as much as possible, right?
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that a lot about you. But
well, I appreciate that you appreciate that, because a lot of people are like, well, this is how my grandparent did it, so this is how we're going to do it. But, like, maybe that worked well for your grandparent, but it doesn't mean that for your specific kid, even the stuff we do with Ember will be probably totally different in some way. Not everything. The general principles will be the same, but, like, you know, the actual practice as to what that looks like will probably be very different with the next child.
Yeah, 100%. My least favorite episode, I would say my least favorite episode was...
Probably one of the ones you had to do by yourself.
No.
Oh, really?
No. I like the episodes I do.
Really? That's really good, because when I had to talk to the camera...
Record, it just, I like... all I have to do is just switch modes. Now I'm teaching.
Oh, that makes sense.
So
I can't do that. I feed off of my audience so much that if I'm speaking to a blank camera, I just...
Oh, I've had to learn. I mean, I'm still learning.
I haven't learned. I don't like it at all. Anyway, sorry. Your least favorite episode. I'm so curious. What are you going to say?
It was probably one of our first ones, when it was a day we were trying to record when everything was going wrong.
Oh, that was so funny.
And this went wrong, that went wrong. I still hadn't asked for help.
And we were
editing the
rushing
podcast
because we were in my parents' house and we were using my dad's office for our studio.
It was so
and
bad.
He only had an hour off work, and he was
so
gone
bad.
for an appointment, so we were rushing to get it done, and then we lost the mic. Remember, we lost my dad's like little clip-on mic, and so then we were looking everywhere for that.
I know, it was terrible.
That was yeah. I wish I knew which episode that was.
It was.
Sometimes we used to record like 2 episodes in a day too. Remember?
Yeah. I mean, we definitely went hard when we started this thing, but hey, to end our kind of season 1 reflection, at the end of the day, what would you say? What is your biggest reflection? It can be a lesson you learned, or just like, I don't know, a comment that you have, or anything about season 1. What is the bow that you're tying on season 1 as we finally get to throw it in the grave? Season 1 was so frustrating.
Really?
It was not that it was frustrating. It was so painful.
Oh, yeah.
And stressful. Sure. Because when you're new at something and then it's the first time that you're getting hated on so publicly, it's like, yo, let's
you
put
honestly
this in the
did
past.
a lot more of the work for season 1 too, because for a while you were doing all the production stuff. I'm so glad we got my dad to help. I
have such a love-hate relationship with this podcast. I love this podcast and I love the message. I mean, we're talking about the gospel, man. We got to put that out.
Yeah.
But man, I've hated this podcast sometimes because it's like, man, it's been so stressful and it's only made my life worse. You know,
you put a lot of work into it.
So
sometimes you would put like 6 to 8 hours of work in before my dad was helping us.
Yeah. And it's still worth it. I don't take it back. I'm just saying, I'm just also acknowledging that it was hard.
And you're ready for season 2.
Exactly.
Well, okay, to answer your question, I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Like Jesus, you know? That didn't land.
Hey.
Anyway, what I was going to say, or the question I was going to ask, which I will then also answer, is how do you feel like you've grown as a person throughout the time of doing season 1, which I can answer because I feel like I know how to answer that better than your question. So I basically just replaced your question with a question of my own.
What's a better question?
Not necessarily.
It's more specific.
Yeah, that's probably why I feel like I can answer it. I feel like I've grown and changed a lot as a person in the last May? Or we started recording in April, I think. We maybe didn't launch till May, but so that's April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February. That's like 11 months. It's almost a year. I guess I didn't have to count that out on my fingers to figure that out. Anyway.
Another thing I love about you.
I'm really a blonde. Just kidding. I don't know. Sometimes I think so.
Just because you're not great at basic addition doesn't mean that. No, I mean, but I'm serious.
Fair.
Like, that's not your you're very emotionally intelligent. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, that's not necessarily what the blonde stereotype means. I don't think.
I don't know.
Oh, really?
I think it's like all of that.
I thought it was like just like forgetting stuff.
Also, this is a stereotype-free zone.
Yeah, shoot. I just kind of insulted blonde people. I'm sorry.
Dang.
I mean, I was taking it on myself as my... Anyway,
hey,
I'm just going to... Let's just go back on all that. They can practice being
free from offense.
Okay.
You just gave them a ministry opportunity.
Wow, that's terrible.
They just grew. Thank you.
Okay, how have I grown in the last 11 months? I feel like having a baby and going through that experience and then raising a child is... I know she's not really a child yet, but this girl is... We had her pediatrician appointment this week, and she's in the 90 to 95th percentile for her age. She's like wearing 1-year-old clothes, and she's 5.5 months old.
What is happening?
So I feel like we have an older child than we actually have because she looks older than she actually is. But anyway, sorry, my brain.
How you've grown as a person?
Yes. I feel like having a kid really it can be an empowering thing. I feel like sometimes like there's a lot of like, oh, wait till you have a kid, you'll realize like you can be patient with everybody else, but you can't be patient with your kid. I actually don't think that's true. I think that it's been powerful for me to see the way that the gospel works, and not that I haven't had moments of frustration, but to see that those things that you hear of like, oh, you know, when you get married, like, you'll see what it's really like or what you're really like with your spouse. Or when you have a kid, you'll see, you know, like, sometimes I feel like people can use that as an excuse for, like, treating the people they love not well.
Sure.
But to see that the gospel actually has the power that you can actually love and treat your kid well. And, like, not that it's easy, but that you can rely on God for the power and the grace to be the kind of parent that you want to be. Sure, are you going to be the kind of parent you want to be in every single moment? No, but you can make the choice to repair when you make a mistake and to go back to what your core values are. And I just think it's been really encouraging for me to see that, like, you can have an ideal. I feel like this is coming off totally wrong. You can know the kind of parent that you want to be, and with God's strength, you can choose to be that kind of parent. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to have moments that you struggle, but that it's not impossible to be kind and loving and gentle and caring and to provide the love and the nurture that children need, and that God can give you the strength to do that. So I think that it's been a very growing season of learning how to do that. I never knew I could live on so little sleep. You know, you realize you're capable of more things than you think.
Yeah.
But really, that's God giving you the grace for what you need, because we didn't need the grace to be parents a year ago that we need now and that God's given us now.
That's
so
good.
I think at the end of the day, it's realizing the power of the provision that God gives. Like, you can actually be a kind, loving parent, even in difficult circumstances, even when it doesn't look the way you thought it was going to look, because God's strength is enough.
That's good. Yeah, God providing what you need when you need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, that's so good.
I feel like that was a very roundabout answer. My brain is struggling, but...
No, I think you're exemplifying the values of season 2. You're discovering. You're voyaging.
I'm also discovering that I will not come without coffee next time.
Hey, there we go. Yeah, no, I let you down there.
No, you didn't.
Well, I wanted to make it for you, and then
you didn't even have time to make yourself. You did make me coffee this morning. I was gonna make myself one of those, like, the Amari healthy, like, energy things. But anyway, how do you feel like you've?
Well, I feel like my answer is pretty similar. I think my answer is summed up by Brandon Lake's "Hard Fought Hallelujah."
You listen to that song a lot.
Hard fought, heartfelt Been through hell, hallelujah. I feel like the biggest thing God has taught me is that I can praise no matter what I'm going through. And that truth is still truth no matter what I'm going through. And so I feel like he's made me a lot stronger through trials. And so, you know, for some people it might sound depressing. To me, it's not a depressing thing as much as like I can say like I'm really proud or I'm really thankful that the last year of, you know, that's been documented by the podcast, it doesn't crush me. And I still believe in the gospel. And I still believe
even more than ever.
Exactly. Because I've discovered that not only in theology, but I've discovered in experience that is true.
Yeah.
And that, man, God can get you through anything.
Yeah.
And so hatred, failure, hurt, like whatever, like it's going to be good. New experiences, lack of sleep, like you're saying, like, I know there's so much more to come, as an old timer would probably remind me. But I also know that, like you said, you know, his mercy is new every morning. His grace is enough. He'll give me the grace for, you know, when I need it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I learned through this process. And at the end of the day, why I'm thankful. I also learned that we can do this. You know, we talked about starting a podcast and it seemed like a very far-fetched thing.
And then we just did it. That's a good lesson.
We freaking did it.
And when I look back at our first few episodes, not necessarily the audio, but the visual.
Oh, it's rough.
Oh, it's painful. It's so painful.
I
but
learned
we did
the truth of what I believed. It was true, which is you have to start somewhere. And we did. And we're in a year, we're probably gonna look back now and say, man, maybe 2 years, I don't know, we're gonna look back, man, that was rough. But that's fine. That's how you grow.
That's true.
Welcome to season 2 of the podcast. We love you guys, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Better Than We Thought podcast.